There is a new Total Drama season, and I am here to give all of my thoughts on it right here, right now. I still cannot even believe that there is a new Total Drama season. I mean, my mind is still blown by this because I thought once Total Drama Rama started, that would be it for Total Drama, and that was going to be the only official Total Drama content we would ever get. So the fact that there is now a new season is incredible to me. I mean, this was announced all the way back in February 2021, and it is now April 2023, so we have waited a very long time for this to come out, so that is another reason why it is crazy to me that this is even real. Now, did we want some original characters in this? Yeah, probably. Was this really as good as the original seasons? Probably not, but the fact that we even got a new season at all is incredible to me, and I am thankful for that because I never thought we would see the day of a new Total Drama season. Anyways, enough of all that. It is now time to actually give my thoughts on this and give this season a proper review. Oh, now where to begin? Where to begin? I've been trying to figure this out for so long on how exactly to structure this review, where to even start, because there are so many things I want to talk to and jump straight into. But I think first I'm going to talk about some of the major changes this season. And just a quick disclaimer, I am not holding back when it comes to spoilers, so if you have not watched the reboot, I would highly recommend clicking off of this video and watching it. But if you have watched it or you just don't care about spoilers, then continue on with the video and let's get on with it. Probably the biggest change to the reboot is Chris McClane's voice, as he is no longer voiced by Christian Potenza, and he is now being voiced by Terry McGurn, most known for voicing Jonesy in 16 and Dawn of Ridonkulous Race. Now I think I can speak for every Total Drama fan when I say it was really weird and really jarring hearing this new Chris voice in the promos. But I do think we were a little harsh and a little unfair because after watching the whole season, I don't think Terry McGurn's voice for Chris is really that bad at all. Now is it the same? No, not really. It's still not the original Chris McClane. It definitely takes a few episodes to get used to, but I actually don't mind it at all, and I think Terry McGurn does a great job at matching Christian Potenza's tone and inflections as Chris McClane. So yeah, we probably should have just let him cook. But nonetheless, it still was a little weird hearing Chris with a new voice. And I was actually planning on making a video about Chris McClane and the hosting situation in the reboot, but I've postponed that for now, but that might come out at a later time. I'm not sure when though. But one of the things I brought up in that video was that it would be convenient, since Terry McGurn is there, that they could have maybe even replaced Chris and put Dawn as the host instead, or maybe make Chef Hatchet the sole host, or maybe put another past contestant as a host instead. But I thought those ideas would be cool just because this is a reboot after all, and so some things aren't going to be the exact same, but nonetheless, it was great to see Chris back even with a different voice, and I didn't think it was that bad overall. Another big change in the reboot had to do with the other co-host of Total Drama, Chef Hatchet, and specifically about his attitude. Chef Hatchet has always been very strict and has always had a very aggressive demeanor and attitude, but this season, it changed a lot. Chef Hatchet has always taken great pleasure in the contestants' sufferings, just like Chris McClane, but this season, he was actually quite considerate and actually cared about the contestants' well-beings, which is definitely an interesting change. You know, I mean, that's not the only thing that changed about Chef Hatchet. He also has a new voice actor, but this guy voiced him in Total Drama Rama, and he's actually pretty good as Chef as well. But Chef Hatchet also ditched the kitchen attire and adopted this more business attire look. And there were a lot of times where Chef Hatchet would go up to Chris McClane and criticize his ideas for the challenge and tell him how this is harmful to the contestants, and this was definitely a weird change for Chef Hatchet. But then again, this reboot is taking place 15 years later, so maybe Chef Hatchet went to therapy and realized how bad this show was and how awful Chris McClane is, but at the same time he needed the bag, he needs the check, and honestly, who can blame him? But I don't know, I mean, I'm definitely interested in seeing if Chef Hatchet is gonna push Chris McClane even more next season. I mean, even at the finale of this season, Chef Hatchet was adding these extra wacky and random challenges to the finale. And these challenges weren't even harmful either, so that was kind of interesting to me, and I'm curious if in the next season, Chef Hatchet is going to have a bigger role. Because I feel like this has to be leading to somewhere. I feel like this can't be the only stuff between Chris McClane and Chef Hatchet. But yeah, it definitely was intriguing to see Chef Hatchet no longer be super mean and strict, but he was actually the nice one of the two. So yeah, that was just something super interesting to me. Another change in the reboot was with the intro, and it is a bit weird at first because of the new lyrics and it feels a lot shorter, but I swear the new intro honestly is not that bad.
Hey, what's up? I'm here to slay. Don't know why the rest even bother to stay. I know the game and I brought the skill. Crushing players' dreams, yeah, you know the drill.
Now obviously this is nowhere near what the actual original intro was like, but I swear, like, after watching this season, like, this was stuck in my head for quite a while. Like, this is just so catchy, like, it really is. But yeah, that's really all I had to say about the intro, at least. Now one last change before I completely move on, but I just wanted to note how much more Survivor-esque this season was compared to any other previous season of Total Drama. And there are a lot of factors that go into this, such as the pre-taped intros at the beginning, which have now become a thing in modern day Survivor, to a lot of the challenges which are very inspired by Survivor, including this one especially, to even just the small montage of them walking to the elimination ceremony, which is very, very reminiscent of the clips of the contestants on Survivor walking to Tribal Council, to invincibility now being called immunity, which I thought was a very interesting change, to Chef Hatchet even calling out why certain people should go, which I thought was a very interesting way of spelling out to the audience why you should be looking at several people as options to leave. And even the strategy talk this season, and I know that strategy is a big part of Total Drama anyways and has always been there, but I feel like they really amped it up this season especially. And then one thing as well that I found really interesting was just the votes being read at the Final Four. And they really got me with that one, I'm not gonna lie. I really thought there was gonna be a tie there for a second when Chris spelled out the rules for what a tie can do, but oh well. But yeah, it was just really interesting to me how much more Survivor-like this season was compared to any other season, just because Total Drama to me has always been, like, of course a parody ripoff of Survivor, but I feel like this season more so wasn't a parody of it, but more so was just a lot like it. And another thing while watching this is I really feel like for us old school Survivor fans, this is probably the closest we will ever get to getting old school Survivor back. I mean, 16 people, they merge at 10 people, there's actual medevacs, there's no idols or wacky advantages and extra twists. It really did feel like an old school Survivor season just in the Total Dramaverse, and I thought that was a pretty interesting move to make for this reboot. So overall, I actually quite enjoyed this reboot. I thought it was a lot of fun, but that doesn't mean that there aren't things that I dislike about it and have critiques about. So for the rest of this review, I'm going to divide this up into things that I like and things that I dislike. And first, I'm going to talk about the things that I liked about the reboot. I really liked the pre-taped intros at the beginning, introducing us to each character, and I feel like this was a great way of giving us backstory to each character very quickly as well. And they reminded me a lot of the audition tapes that they would have for each Total Drama character, and I felt like this was a great way of integrating those into the actual show. And they really did establish some good backstory for a lot of the characters. For example, Emma and Chase's relationship and breakup, that was a great way of establishing them right off the bat, as well as Priya's own motivations for being on Total Drama, and how this was very important for her, and she continued building off of these emotions every single episode. And so, yeah, in general, I just really liked these pre-taped intros, and they were a good way of establishing and introducing these characters to us. So this might be something kind of minor, but it's something that I really noticed when watching this reboot, and it's that there are a lot of scenes taking place at the mess hall. And I feel like this is something that was really lacking in the last 3 seasons of Total Drama, and I specifically mentioned those 3 seasons because those took place at Camp Wawanakwa and on Pakatu Island. And I feel like just having a mess hall helps the whole campiness come alive, the whole camp energy, aesthetic, the look. And Total Drama Island and Total Drama Action, there was always a place where they got to meet and eat together. And I feel like it's an important part of helping the identity of the show come alive. And it's a super easy way to show the characters meeting, eating, talking about different things, whether it's strategy or just life. And it's an easy place for character development to happen. I mean, a lot of different things happened this season within the mess hall, such as Raj and Bowie's relationship starting, or at least just their feelings. Emma and Bowie discussing and gossiping about Chase. Priya and Millie discussing including Scary Girl into their alliance, Z lying about his injury to his leg. I mean, there were so many cool things happening in the mess hall this season, and the mess hall is such an iconic place in Total Drama Island, and I'm glad that it made a comeback in the reboot. Now, I already talked about Chef Hatchet and how he had a different attitude this season and became much more of a voice of reason for Chris McLean, but I just wanted to note that I really liked how much more toned down Chris and Chef were, but especially Chris. Chris is still the same sleazeball that he's always been, who enjoys the contestants' misfortune and pain, but he's no longer that evil, psychotic criminal this time around. And I feel like that portrayal of him was just very, very extreme, and this feels a lot more like Chris from the early seasons, but especially Island. Chris is just back to being the host with the most. He's still that slimy reality TV host who relishes in the contestants' pain, but he's no longer trying to actively murder or kill these people anymore, and I feel like that just makes him way more enjoyable and palatable as a character overall. And so I'm really glad that Chris McClain just felt more like Chris McClain in this reboot. So I'm eventually going to talk about each character individually in this video, but I just wanted to point out for now that I love how grounded and normal this cast is, especially when compared to the last regular season of Total Drama, which was Pakatu Island. That cast was just way too gimmicky and way too wacky. Total Drama Island easily has the best kind of cast with its reality TV and high school stereotypes, but I definitely think there was a little bit of that in this cast as well, but there was a lot more integration with the modern world as well. You know, like Emma and Chase, they're like the typical prank couple YouTubers, that makes sense. We had Julia, who was like a fake Instagram social media influencer. Stuff like that is actually really cool to see, because those kind of people are pretty prevalent on the internet. But even a character like Bowie, you see that a lot on reality TV, and I feel like that's also pretty realistic. And just an example of someone who is pretty gimmicky and wacky on this cast, Scary Girl. I don't mind her at all for that, and I actually think she's a great character, especially because she's the only one who's like that, and so it perfectly balances out the cast. So in general, this cast is great because it's normal, and even though it might seem a little boring on paper, I promise this cast is actually great and a lot better because they are normal people. Due to their characters and stories, I think that this was a great final two, and I think Bowie and Priya were both great selections for this placement, especially when you consider their story in the last two episodes involving them and Millie. And I think they both served their roles greatly in this, with Priya being the protagonist and Bowie now forming into the antagonist that he's been building up to be. And you know, Priya to me makes complete sense as the winner, as basically her whole story was that her parents wanted her to go on Total Drama and win it eventually, and so now she did it. And I think that Bowie had a great story of strategically doing whatever he could to get to this point, and then only losing it by a hair. But I'm pretty sure that Priya is going to be the winner who's mostly shown in different versions of the season. But I can't wait to watch the version where Bowie wins, because I'm going to assume that in that version Julia is going to get half the money, which she rightfully deserves. And I thought that was also a great story that they put into the finale between them. So yeah, in general, I would say that they nailed it with the final two this season. One of the main selling points of this new Total Drama season was that this is going to feature a much more diverse cast, and diversity across the board in terms of racial diversity, there being an amputee, and there being multiple LGBTQ+ characters. And I think that Total Drama absolutely nailed the diversity, and this is some of the best portrayal of diversity that I've personally seen on television. For instance, the racial diversity in this season is amazing. There's so many people that are brown or black, and I think this is awesome. And the reason why I think this is such an amazing portrayal of diversity is because there isn't any type of agenda or political message that is being shoved down people's throats. These people are just treated as normal human beings, and that is all that people want to see at the end of the day. Nobody wants to be told over and over again how diverse this is. People can see the diversity, people can see themselves and other people that they see on the screen, and that's it. That's all that needs to happen, and I think Total Drama absolutely nailed this. And I think as well with Raj and Bowie, who were the LGBTQ+ representation of this season, I think that they nailed it again with this type of diversity as well. Bowie is completely out as gay and is super confident in that, but on the other hand, Raj is more in the closet and nervous about coming out, but is eventually able to do it because of his best friend Wayne being completely supportive of him. And I love this part of the story as well. Wayne, who is a super supportive best friend, who wants Raj to tell him that he's gay, and makes him super comfortable with doing so and being so proud of him. I think that's amazing, but even just the story between Raj and Bowie as well is super awesome to watch. Even if it is a bit short because of the shorter season, but I'm sure that this would get so much more attention and so much more meaningful development in a longer season as well. Now obviously there are going to be some serious and tough conversations that come along with diversity, such as of course Raj being in the closet and this whole anticipation of him coming out. But that is a real thing that happens. And when you base these types of things on actual things that happen, on realism, that helps a lot with selling the point of your diversity, because these are real life problems and real life things that do happen. In general, I just love the story between Bowie and Raj and the representation for gay people that Total Drama had this season, and I think they did this super well. And then the portrayal of an amputee, which is Z, I think once again they did an amazing job with this. They didn't treat this as some huge, insane deal, or they didn't treat this as some type of abnormality or any type of political message. Z being an amputee is just who he is, and that's it. It's maybe treated as a big deal when it's first revealed, but afterwards, nobody cares. Everyone's cool with it. He's not treated any differently than anyone else, and I think that is amazing, and that is how you handle diversity. And I think that Total Drama did an absolutely amazing job with this, and I love the diversity this season. So even though I'm keeping things very general and overall, I am going to be talking about all of the individual characters later on in the video after I'm done covering everything that I dislike. But I just wanted to end off this portion of the video by saying that I think this is the best 13 episode season of Total Drama. And of course, I want there to be 26 episodes, and honestly, I'll even take 18 or 20 as a compromise. But I think that this is definitely by far the best utilization of 13 episodes that I have seen in Total Drama. And I am very critical of 13 episodes and still am even with this season, but I feel like given the 13 episodes, they did the best that they can, and I feel like I can't say the same for the past 3 times that they've used 13 episodes. And I'm really glad that this same cast is getting another season. That's just going to give them more time to develop, and I really like that for them. Even though I want there to be a 26 episode season, I will gladly take 2 seasons of 13 episodes with the same cast, and I can't wait to see how that turns out. Now, it's time to talk about the things about this season that I dislike. This should be a lot of fun. Okay, so this is just quite small and a minor nitpick of mine, but I do wish that the season was named something different than just Total Drama Island, just because there already is another Total Drama Island, the original first season ever. I feel like they could have named it something like, I don't know, maybe resurrect the name Total Drama Reloaded, or just some other original name, but it's not something that I can't overlook, but it is just a minor nitpick of mine. Also on the list of small nitpicks that are pretty insignificant, the Drone of Despair. Now I feel like this is an attempt at making the elimination method more modern, but I don't know, it just falls kind of flat for me. It's definitely better than a toilet, but it's nothing that special or iconic, and I feel like all of the other past elimination methods are iconic in their own way, and like I said before, this one just falls flat, but it doesn't have a profound impact on the season or anything, so it doesn't matter that much, but it's just something that I find a bit lame. Okay, now it's time to get into the real stuff. Now, this is something that really bugged me while watching, but I'm not seeing anyone else talk about it, which is super surprising to me, but it's the inconsistencies with Julia and her phones. So immediately when Julia arrives to the island, she is immediately confiscated of all of her phones, at least the ones that Kristen Chef can find, because the metal detector clearly didn't find all of them. And, that's gonna happen. But throughout the entire season, Julia is still using more phones. Now this was really weird to me because they clearly made it a point that she was not allowed to have any phones whatsoever. Now of course, she did have other phones on her that managed to scrape by, but Kristen Chef or anyone else on the production team never thought to take them away from her. Now, are Chris and Chef scared of doing this? And that seems completely out of character. I don't doubt that Chris is scared at all about taking phones away from a teenager. But why the heck was she allowed to just keep all of her phones for the whole season if she was supposed to give them up in the first place? And this bugs me even more because the phones play such a massive part in the season. With MK using a phone for her own personal strategy, as well as the whole reason that Julia even finds out about the video being uploaded about her, is because she has a phone of hers. So the phones are clearly important to the story, yet they're not even supposed to be there in the first place, and the production team clearly does not care, despite the fact that they're supposed to, because that's what was said in the first very episode. So either she should have been able to keep all of her phones in the first place, or she should have never been able to keep any of them at all. So the inconsistency there just bugs me a lot because the phones play such a pivotal part in the season, and I'm going to talk more about the phones later, but for now I'm just going to keep it as this and move on. Something else I wasn't keen on was Ripper staying a lot longer than he should have. Now I'm going to get more into Ripper later on when I get into all of the characters, but I really think that he should have left at episode 2 or episode 4. I think both were perfect opportunities for him to leave. I think there's a lot of unfinished business there with Axel and Scary Girl, and I know there's a second season, so they might get to do more in that season, but I just felt like for the purpose of what Ripper's character is, he just lasted way too long. And I feel like by the time that he was eliminated, it wasn't necessarily a satisfying ending or anything for his character. So that's just an issue I have with the boot order, and I largely don't have any real issues with the boot order, but that is just one of the glaring issues with it, is Ripper staying way too long. Now it's time to talk about that episode. Episode 5, the farting episode. Now I've seen pretty much everyone say how terrible this episode is and how it is easily the worst episode of the season, and I'm here to actually disagree with that. Now this is in the dislike section of the video, so there are things about this that I don't like, but I don't think it's terrible, and I definitely don't think this is even close to being the worst episode of the season. Now obviously the main issue with this episode is that it is just centered around farting, and farting is basically what takes up like 80% of this episode. Now toilet humor has been around in Total Drama basically forever, and as long as it's toned down, I don't have a big issue with it, but when it isn't and it's excessive, then that's when it's a problem. Now I know I'm not the intended audience for this necessarily, but I'm not even sure if the intended audience would even enjoy this, but who am I to have a say on that? But anyways, this whole episode is just centered around farting, and that's when you know that it is just way too much. Now I can look past some of the farting and actually look at the good stuff that happened this episode, because there is quite a lot of good stuff that happens this episode. One thing that I actually really do like about this episode is the fact that there are scenes that take place after the immunity challenge and before the elimination ceremony, and this is the first time that this happened in this season. And both of those scenes did really well in furthering some plot lines, some really major plot lines as well. For one, the Raj and Bowie storyline with Wayne was furthered in this episode, and they had such a beautiful scene at the end of this episode. As well as Julia, who has probably the best scene in the entire season, where she rips into the raptor and then later finds out that that video was leaked online. And then that whole thing starts her villain arc. And on top of this, that also furthers the plotline with MK and the phones. Now obviously that doesn't really go anywhere, but it still serves its purpose in doing that. And I also think this episode does a great job at explaining Damien's elimination and making it feel like the right time for him to go. These may seem like small things, but these really are important to the season as a whole, as well as this episode in particular. And so that's why I don't think this episode is really that terrible, as there are enjoyable things within the episode. Now obviously, the farting is just way too much, but I still see the positives in this episode, but I still don't think it's that great either. So I'm basically here to just say that it's not terrible and it's not the worst episode of the season, and I'm just here to shine some light on it, but also being realistic that of course, it's not amazing either. But anyways, I'm now going to talk about what I think is personally the worst episode of the season. And that is episode 8, the barfing episode. Yep, another episode completely centered around toilet humor and another bodily function, but I find this episode way more gross than the farting episode, and I'm not sure how other people don't see this as well. I can at least take a little bit of farting, but with the vomiting, oh no, I can't do that. And I know that they colored the vomit to be rainbow to make it a bit more kid friendly and stuff, but no, because it still happens the entire episode and I just don't like to see it or hear it. Especially the noises with like the stomach growling and stuff, oh yeah, no thank you, I don't want any part of that. Now the challenge idea itself I did like, because it's something that happens in several seasons where the contestants have to eat bad food. And some of the concepts that Chef came up with for the food were hilarious, but nonetheless, seeing these people actually eat this stuff was not cool to watch. Especially when Julie and Ripper had to eat the tapeworm. Oh my god, that was completely nasty. That was just revolting. Like, this doesn't even compare to just farting happening in episode 8. Like, that is completely tame compared to all this. And on top of all of this revolting stuff happening, nothing else really happens in this episode. The one thing that sticks out in my mind is Emma and Chase and how they're back together, but then they kind of break up again. I don't know, their whole thing by this point was super lame. And I guess I can segue into that real quick, and I feel like Emma getting back with Chase like twice was completely lame, especially for her character, and I feel like the relationship was just stupid, honestly. Like, I don't know what they were thinking, and I know they had a lot less time with episodes and stuff like that, but like, it just wasn't interesting, especially in this episode, and especially that one scene, like how I mentioned with the stomach growling, where they're constantly saying these random weird things to each other, and their stomachs are just growling more and more and more. That was probably one of the worst scenes of the entire season for me. I did not like that. I didn't like hearing it or watching it or anything. So with all that in mind, this is easily the worst episode. I know episode 5 is not that great either, but this is by far the worst, and I'm not sure how other people don't see it. Now, the final thing that I dislike that I'm going to discuss, which might take a little bit, is the fact that this season is only 13 episodes long. Now, I really feel like 13 episodes hampers how much development and depth can go into a season, and I don't think it's any coincidence that Total Drama's best seasons all happen to have 26 episodes. Because with that, more things can be fleshed out, things don't have to be rushed, and at 13 episodes, a lot of stuff has to be rushed. And that's probably my biggest complaint with this season, is how many storylines are just completely rushed because of there only being 13 episodes. Now, I know that this cast is having another season of 13 episodes, so a lot of these plotlines can be tied up and furthered along, but I can only judge what I've seen in this season. And so that makes me a little dissatisfied with a lot of the stuff that I saw. I think one major example has to be Priya and Millie's relationship, which I liked, but at the same time, I felt a little dissatisfied with the final impact of it all. For one, I feel like Millie just should have been a lot more hateful and annoying and kind of mean, especially towards Priya, because I felt like for her character that really should have been how she was, but they didn't fully commit to it, and so the final impact of everything in the finale just kind of felt a little weak because of that. As well as the fact that Priya finding out about what Millie had been writing about her absolutely should not have happened right before the finale. Because in the finale, they make up anyways, and it just feels completely rushed. Having a slower burn there would be a lot better and would make the whole thing a lot more impactful, but the way it isn't bad, but I just feel a little dissatisfied with it. Now, I talked about them a little bit earlier, but Emma and Chase, I'm just going to keep this brief. Like I said before, I felt like this was completely lame, how they kept getting back together and breaking up between like 4 or 5 episodes. I mean, I imagine with a full season they'd be able to develop this a lot more properly, but with only 13 episodes and then them flipping back and forth in like 4 different episodes altogether, nah. But anyways, another big example of this is Julia's true colors being revealed. I felt like a lot more build up and really was needed for this plotline, especially because of how instant the change is from Julia being a fake social media influencer to then her true self, as the two things were revealed right next to each other in episodes, episode 5 and episode 6. It was an immediate turnaround, and I felt like for this kind of reveal for one of the focal characters, there needed to be a lot more build up. Now, I love Julia, she's probably my favorite character, but the fake social media influencer Julia was a lot of fun, and I didn't want to see that go so abruptly. And with 26 episodes, there absolutely can be a lot more build-up leading into Julia being the antagonist of the second half of the season, and I would have preferred to see that rather than just the instant change, which was a little bit jarring at the time. But I think the biggest plotline that was a fumble for me was MK's story with using the phone for her own personal strategy. To me, this felt like MK was being set up as a big antagonist, at least for the first half of the season, and yet she kinda did nothing. I mean, we know from one of her confessionals that she was able to find out about Julia's true colors and what Millie's true intentions were, but she never did anything with the information or told anyone about it. Now, I know that MK did upload a video of Julia revealing her true colors on social media, but Julia took it upon herself to reveal her true colors outside of just that video to the entire cast. MK didn't go and tell everyone about what Julia did or anything like that. Julia did all of that by herself. The only real impact there was just Julia's social media following. And then with Millie's true intentions, MK never told anyone about that either, and the only reason why that was revealed was because the phone, which was thrown into the lake, was then randomly washed up on shore several episodes later for some reason, and I'm guessing the phones must be waterproof or something, which I didn't know was the case, but that's probably a major detail that should be revealed to the audience. But anyways, basically, despite the information that MK had, she never directly did anything with this, so she only slightly indirectly impacts these moments, and it just feels a bit pointless on her end, the fact that she did all of this, and it came of nothing. And her storyline just ended abruptly. I mean, with 26 episodes, I would imagine she'd be eliminated around episode 12 or 13, right before the merge started, so there'd at least be quite a few episodes of her gathering information on her phones, maybe telling people here and there, using all of that for her own personal gain. But that's not even the main focal point for the 6 episodes that she's even there, and it just feels really disappointing to me because it felt like this was leading to something bigger.
So look, I know that this cast is getting 13 or more episodes to themselves, and like I said, I'm sure that a lot of this stuff is going to get tied up and there's going to be a lot more satisfaction to come from this, but just based on this season, the 13 episodes really does a lot when it comes to these storylines because a lot of stuff has to be rushed, and I just really didn't like that because I felt like with 26 episodes, a lot of this could be amazing. And like I said, Total Drama's best seasons are 26 episodes, and that's just a fact.
And that about wraps it up in terms of things that I like and dislike about the season overall. And now it's time to talk about each character individually. And I'm going to try to keep this brief but also very honest, and I'm going to do this in the order that they were all eliminated in. So first up is Caleb, and yeah, there's really not much to say, is there? I mean, the explanation for him being voted out was about as brief as his actual appearance on the show. I mean, he was basically just Justin in Total Drama Island, but in one episode. I mean, maybe he'll do something in the next season, but in terms of my actual opinions on him, I got nothing. Next up is Axel, and she also reminded me of someone from Total Drama Island, and that being Eva, largely because of their personalities, but also because they were both the second person voted out. And despite her really short stay, I actually quite liked Axel and I really wish she stayed, especially over Ripper, and I felt like her character had a lot more potential besides just being Eva 2.0. You know, I really liked the whole survival aspect of her personality, and I felt like there could have been an interesting twist there, especially because they already had a little bit of that with Sean and Bakatu Island. And I felt like she was a big part in making episode 2 a lot of fun, and so I really hope that they can dive into her personality and give her a bit more depth in the second season, but in terms of this season, I do wish she lasted a bit longer. Next up is the greatest actress of our time. It is Nichelle LaDonna. I really like Nichelle, and I was so sad to see her leave so early, but I imagine she's going to have a lot more to do in the second season because there seemed to be some sort of arc that was built up in her last episode, and I thought that that was done really well. But I did think she could offer a lot more to this season, and I thought that there was maybe going to be a rivalry between her and Julia because they seemed to be kind of alluding to that in the second episode, but that didn't really go anywhere. But nonetheless, I did really like Nichelle, and I think she has a lot more to do. Now on to Scary Girl. Now, I wasn't quite sure about Scary Girl at first because compared to everyone else in the cast, she's a lot more gimmicky and cartoony. So it took me a little bit to warm up to her, but I really did warm up to her, and by the time that she was eliminated, I really liked her and I really wish she stayed, especially over Ripper. I can't believe I'm saying that about another character, but it is the truth. Now, she was really creepy, but at the same time, this was super fun, and I had a lot of fun watching her, and I can't wait to see her do more. Next up is Damien, and I actually like Damien. I thought he was pretty cool, but I'm not gonna lie when I say that I think he left at the perfect time. Despite the fact that he was in the bottom 2 with Ripper, so here's another case of someone that I would have liked to see stay over Ripper, but I also think that because of the irony going into his elimination, I think this was a perfect time for him to go. You know, I didn't really want another World Tour DJ situation, and that's actually one of my videos right now, you should check that out, where someone complains and wants to be voted out but then never actually just leaves. And I know that they had a bit of a stipulation in the contract where he would have to owe them $1 million if he left, but I'm just glad that this didn't go on for too long and damage his character in any way, and so he left at a good time with some good irony, and I feel like he's going to do a lot more in the next season anyways. And next is MK. I mean, I've already said so much about her though, haven't I? I'm just going to keep this simple and then move on. But I liked MK and I thought she was pretty cool, but I just felt like she had so much more potential and I was just unsatisfied with what came of her story, and so I'm hoping that in the next season they can achieve that potential. So next is Wayne and Raj, and it's a little hard to separate them because they're rarely ever separate, but they pretty much go together anyways, so it doesn't really matter. But I found them super funny, and it's kind of funny too because I thought that they were going to be a lot douchier than what they were because that's kind of what they came off as in the first episode, but they were just super funny and hilarious, and they were also pretty dumb too, but they were also quite intelligent with like sports and all that kind of stuff, you know, and I love all the sports references, whether they were with hockey, which isn't something I watch too much, but they did shout out the Sharks, my favorite team, and they also shouted out wrestling as well, which of course I love.
But yeah, they were always just a breath of fresh air in every episode, and they never got too annoying or anything like that. And like I said before, I love the storyline between Raj and Bowie. I think that was super sweet, and I also love Wayne's role of being super supportive in that. So in general, they were just super fun, and I think the way that they left was also cool as well, considering that they left together. I think that that's just fitting for their character. And so yeah, overall, they're just amazing. Okay, now we're on to Ripper. Now, I don't completely dislike or hate Ripper because I completely get the point of his character, but I do think he overstayed his welcome by quite a bit. I think if he left in episode 2 or 4, which were both perfect opportunities for him to, I think he would have been a lot more tolerable as a character, but because he stayed for so long, he did get a lot more annoying, but I still don't think he's a bad character necessarily. I mean, to me, he's basically like Ezekiel and Owen's love child, and so I imagine this as the alternate reality where Ezekiel actually does somewhat successful, which is kind of weird, but that is basically how I view Ripper. So I don't think he's a terrible character by any means, but he definitely should have left a lot earlier. And next up is Z, and I love Z. I think he is absolutely hilarious, and he is a great constant source of comic relief throughout the entire season. And like I said before, I love the way that the show treats him as an amputee, and I think that's super well done. And that kind of leads me into one thing about Z that I find extremely underrated, and it's the fact that he can just easily convince people of anything unintentionally. Like, he blatantly lies about why he's an amputee, but everyone eats up anything he has to say about that, which is hilarious. As well as the fact that he somehow managed to convince everyone that he was in an alliance with them, despite the fact that he was planning something completely different. And I think the way that his elimination was handled was great because of that, and I think that's something a little bit unexplored about Z, and it'd be funny if that became more of a focal point of his character because it just fits him so well. So yeah, Z, extremely hilarious. Okay, now on to Chase. I mean, I'm not that crazy about Chase really, and I'm not really into the whole Emma and Chase thing, especially because of how that factored into the last few episodes when they were just going on and off with each other. That was just pretty lame. And I mean, Chase can be funny, absolutely. When they really lean into him being a jerk, that's funny. But at the same time, I don't think Chase ever really got any type of humbling or comeuppance or anything like that. And I'm sure he's going to get that in the second season, but just from this first season, he didn't get any type of karma, and so for that, I just didn't feel satisfied with his character in general. And so, yeah, I mean, he can be funny and he's alright, but that's basically it. And next is Emma, and I liked Emma. I thought she was cool, but I definitely thought she was a lot better when she was just unhinged. I think that's when she was at her absolute best as a character. Whenever she just immediately went back to Chase, that just hurt her a lot for me. I just didn't really enjoy that at all. And I think Bowie said it best. It was just all a big waste of time. But if Emma can just continue being an unhinged mess, I have no issue. Next is Julia, and I mean, this is quite obvious, isn't it? She's easily the best character, my favorite character. She has some of my favorite scenes of the entire season, and I mean, that's really all that needs to be said about her. Moving on to Millie, and I actually think Millie is quite alright. I definitely don't dislike her, but I do think she could have been a lot better. For the premise of her character, I think she would have been better if she was just, I don't know, just more annoying or just more of a hater, because I don't really think she went in on her other castmates as much as she should have. And like, for example, Millie taking Priya's immunity without even thinking about it is an incredible moment, and I think she would have been better if she had more of those types of moments, but nonetheless, I do think Millie's alright. Now the penultimate character, which is Bowie, and like I said before, I think that Total Drama did a great job with their gay representation this season, and for me, Bowie is such a great character. I think he's absolutely hilarious, and he is always coming through with funny confessionals. And in general, I just really like his character progression throughout the season. I think he makes for a really good anti-hero throughout most of the season, and then just before the finale is when he becomes the full-fledged villain. And I think that this is really interesting to not have someone be the villain for the entire season, but to slowly but surely come into that. And so with all that said, I think that Bowie is probably the second best character after Julia. And now the final character, and who's also the winner, at least for the version that we've seen, Priya. Now, I've seen a lot about how she's of a similar archetype to Sky and Zoe, and I definitely agree with that, but I also think that she's just way better than both of them. I mean, for one, she's not going God mode in every challenge, and that helps a lot. But, you know, as ridiculous as it is, I actually quite like her backstory of her parents being these big Total Drama fans and just being these like Reddit or RHAP, like student of the game type of people. So I thought that was pretty funny. But I mean, in general, like, I think she's just a nice and normal character. I don't think she's anything too crazy or anything like that. So I don't know if I can say that I outright love her or anything like that. But I do think that she is just a nice character, and that's good enough for me. So in general, I think that this is a good season. I like it. It's definitely the best 13 episode season of Total Drama by far. And yeah, there's a lot of improvements that can be made, especially with the 13 episodes, but I'm hopeful that since this cast is getting a second season, that a lot of stuff can be improved upon and followed up on, and so I'm excited for that. Oh man, that was a lot. If you have stayed through this entire video, I seriously appreciate you a lot. Thank you so much. I promise I was not intending on this being this long. I knew I had a lot to talk about, but I didn't realize that it would be basically like 40 minutes worth of content to talk about. And so, yeah, once again, I appreciate you guys for all being here. Thank you all for the support on my comeback to YouTube. I really appreciate that. Comment down below what you'd like to see, like the video, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you.